Hey, LEC community. Welcome to Ask an Educator. My name is Edgar Palacios. I'm the founder of the Latinx Education Collaborative, and we work to increase representation of Latinx education professionals in K-12. I have with me our Chief Community Officer, Susana Elizarraz. Susana, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. Can't complain too much. But I'm excited today. We have one of our favorite educators with us, La Señora Lori Parra. How are you doing, Lori?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I just saw an announcement a couple of minutes ago that the governor of Missouri shut down schools for the remainder of the year. So I just want to check in with both of you and see how you are doing as teachers. How does this feel? And just kind of get your thoughts on that.
He did. He just shut it down. I am not surprised that he closed the schools for the remainder of the year. As an educator, it's hard because it happened so fast. The way that it happened before the Friday, it's actually like the Thursday night, the Friday before spring break, and it was like no goodbyes. It's like, boom, you're out of the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a similar feeling over here. My grade level partner and I immediately started texting. Mm-hmm. Lots of sad faces, lots of crying faces, but like a millisecond later, we're like, maybe we can do a barbecue like in the summer, or maybe we can, find a space and give them their graduation anyway. And so like, it just keeps amazing me how teachers, it's just their forefront is like, what can I do for the kids? We took that millisecond to like grieve, and I think that grief is going to continue as the weeks go on, but it's just been really just inspiring to see teachers that are like, okay, now what's next? Like, how can we make this better? How can we make it okay? So
yeah,
right. I would agree with her.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that in Kansas, the governor had already closed schools through the remainder of the year. And so I know that there is to your point, Susana, a lot of grief in the community around not potentially being able to see students in person. I know a lot of students are graduating without saying goodbye. And so there's a lot of emotions here that I just want to elevate and acknowledge as we go into this conversation. But Lori, we're here to learn about you today. We're here to talk to you and kind of get your thoughts and see how you're doing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so believe it or not, I never thought I would be in education. I really didn't care for teachers growing up. I didn't even care for school. I was actually a 2-year high school dropout. And then education is my second career choice, I would say. But I got an opportunity that arose to become the short-term suspension monitor at Argentine Middle School, home of the Mustangs. And that was actually my own middle school. And once I was in that role, I actually loved it. And I had to learn 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade curriculum. And just working with the students, it was amazing. And I fell in love with education. By that time, I had a bachelor's degree in criminal justice policing because I wanted to be a detective. But when I finally went back to school for my high school diploma, I remember praying and asking God, what should I do? And he told me to become a teacher. And I said, no, I'm not going to become a teacher. I'm going to be a detective. And I had all these different jobs. And none of them panned out, not even for the degree that I had. But when I got into that position with I would say the bad kids, right? They would say, because they were always in ISS, or it just takes one to know one, because I just kind of spoke their language. I just was ready to go back to school and said, all right, I want to do this. I want to become a teacher. So I think I was maybe 32 or 33, something like that, when I actually pursued my master's in teaching.
How did you end up at Argentine Middle? Like, what brought you there?
It was an actual position, I mean, before I had these, I was in insurance. I was a case manager working like with food stamps and Medicaid, and they were looking for a position for this short-term suspension, and I said, "Oh, I could do that," because I wanted a change, a different environment. So when I got in the classroom, and the funny thing is my first day there, the security guard who was there when I was there, it was his last day. He was retiring, and so I'm thinking, he's still there, like he's still alive, he's there. And so he said, "Oh, you're going back to your mother's ship," because he remembers I lived in ISS. I was bad. I was naughty. And so he took me, it was the same classroom. It was the same ISS room. And so from there, that's just where I fell in love with education as an educator.
Do you feel like your background in criminal justice lended to your experience, your transition into that suspension position?
I don't think so. I think all of the actual work of me being, because I was a case manager, also with students who were in transition from 16 to 21, that actually helped because I was there a couple of years, and that helped me land in that position as well. I also think just some of the adversity and the things that I've gone through growing up also helped me in that position to understand the students. Currently where I am now, fast forwarding, I'm a grad lab coach at Central High School in the Kansas City, Missouri School District.
Awesome. And by the way, one of your colleagues is with us. Just shout out to Charlotte Wafer. Says God knows best. You're a teacher and a very good one. So thanks for joining us, Charlotte.
Hey, Miss Wafer.
I'm interested, so you and I connected at Amplify, which is a conference for educators of color, and we kind of bonded immediately. I love your opinions and your thoughts, and kind of the way you think and you process certain things. I'm interested in what your experience has been like doing the grad lab virtually, and what kind of issues you're seeing your students face that you're trying to address right now in terms of immediacy.
So with the grad lab position, it is a position where I help students with credit recovery. And that's what one of the main keys of it is for, I have juniors and seniors who are working on recovering credits. But there's so much more that it can be, as in students attaining and graduating early. And it is a virtual format. So it is online learning. So it's
Cool.
We call it the grad lab. And like you could be working on math and Susanna could be working on English, and I am there facilitating the entire lab, which is like a classroom. And then it doesn't stop there, because if you go home, then they have the access to continue their coursework. So it's really they're driving their own learning. So when school shut down a few weeks ago, it was really nothing new for the students who are already doing the work virtually. The problem came in is for those students who don't have access to wireless or don't have a hotspot. That is the struggle that some of our students continue to have now, the access to the wireless and the internet.
Yeah, the digital divide is seen to be, obviously very clear and present as a lot of other inequities in our system right now. And so what kind of solutions are you seeing as an educator? Are you trying to circumvent that kind of system right now? I know there are a lot of organizations right now trying to help support, and I think that we're having some issues with locating, what do you call that? We're locating the hotspots and whatnot. I know that there's a lot of demand, but not a lot of supply at the moment. So how are you navigating that system?
I think with the digital divide, it's very present. It was very present when we're in the building, and it really surfaced a few weeks ago. To answer your question, I think it's Sprint was one who was providing our hotspots. But it was very limited on the gigabytes. I'm learning all this new lingo because I'm not by no means. And it allowed, like, I think it was like 3 gigabytes and you could watch a movie and do something. So it wasn't enough. It's not enough data for our students if they're doing 6 assignments. They just can't be, streaming and all of that,
right,
or they're going to run out of their data quick. As a teacher and to the teachers, we have to get out of our comfort zone during this time and realize, even though we're in the comfort of our own homes, it's not a classroom. So we scream and preach about doing the work of equity, in the classroom, and making sure that, Edgar has this so he can be successful and Susanna has this. But now that they're in their own homes, we have to make sure that we understand Edgar now might have to take care of his 5 siblings and then balance these 8 classes, while Susanna might have to do her schoolwork on her cell phone. And so when she turns in her English assignment, it's going to be formatted however it is on the cell phone. So we have to be flexible and not grade as hard per our rubric, and stay flexible to our students. It's kind of like they all have their own learning plans now. And that's something that we actually just discussed. Like, we can't be as hard as we were in the classroom. We're now, okay, Edgar, this is your situation. And we have to figure out how we're going to reach them and how we're going to best service them individually.
Yeah. Just a quick shout out to your community. I see Lauren Butler saying, "Go, Lori. Love hearing your story." And then we have Deanna Munoz online as well. So proud of you, Lori. Love that you are sharing your story that resonates with so many of us. Woo, woo. I hope you said it like that, Deanna. Thanks for joining us again. Yeah, Susanna, what are you seeing as an educator as well in terms of, like, to your point, adjusting for students and being more flexible around the rubrics and around the lesson planning and around the way that students are actually able to submit their virtual work?
I think this has been particularly difficult for, it sounds like, teachers like Lori and teachers like me, where our expectations and our standards are really high for our students. Despite the struggles they come in with to our classrooms, the expectation's always there, and we've had to adjust that a little bit. We have a Google Classroom for our students, and there's a loud car, sorry. And only 10 to 15 of the 70 kids I teach a day have gotten on at all, despite us, calling and all of that. But like you said, that if your family is working off of one cell phone or 2 cell phones, and not one of them is a kid's cell phone, then it has to change a little bit. It's been hard because you also want to give grace. We have to give grace, to our kids at this moment and to their families. We have families that really have a lot of, even on a regular, be busy and are really, and that's what I believe for all of our families. And so adding this on top of that, It has been difficult. So.
I also found that us as teachers, our students, we stepped into their world. Virtual, they've been doing, they got this down. And so while we're sleeping our normal old people hours when we sleep, they're up. And if they can't make a Zoom meeting, we can't get ourselves all upset. I was going to say something else. We can't get all upset about it. We're going to have to, be flexible and take and take the work that they're turning in, even if it's at 3 a.m. Another thing was I went to Walmart, I think last week, and 4 of my students were there working. And so it just shows you, they're essential workers. But now that Walmart, is the booming place, really busy, the booming place, Walmart's, I can work you now. You can come to work because you guys aren't in school. And one of my students, she told me when I'm talking to her, she was telling me, Miss Peters, they don't care. They don't care that, we have schoolwork. They just gave us more hours to come into work because we're busier.
I appreciate you elevating that too. I think that, we often, it can be easy to forget that, there are other needs that students are trying to tackle, and they're also a part of a family unit. And some of our students are definitely relied upon to bring in home income and to bring home other things that some other students aren't necessarily responsible for. And so, yeah, to your point, like there's a huge need for workers in terms of Walmart and other companies like that. That's a really great point. How do you feel like a lot of teachers are being flexible right now? If you were to give advice to other educators at the moment, like what would you tell them in order to help them navigate with maybe different expectations of students?
I would say it's a toss-up because as a teacher, sometimes we get our tunnel vision that this is our agenda and this is what we have to get done because, we have people above us who are saying these are the standards, these are the standards we have to meet, and this is what we're going to get measured by. But then we have to also understand, and then we have our own stresses, at home, like, oh my God, if we have essential workers, are they going to bring that home while we're tied down? And then from 9 to 3, we're in our homes doing this. So I would just say, don't forget your own self-care. Make sure you're still taking the time for you. Make sure that you're just doing your best to service your students that you can, but you just can't penalize them. And do your best that you're trying to reach out to the families,
I think to add on to that, we were really disappointed this week. And I know, Laura, you're in KCMO as well. We were really disappointed with the cancellation of the food distribution and the laptop distribution on the elementary level. But it kind of came down to that this is new for all of us. None of us have lived through anything like this, at least in the last, last generation. And so giving grace to our school district, to our teachers, to our higher ups to understand that like there is no perfect way to do this. We are, my principal said, we're building the plane as we're flying, and that's a scary thought because we know that at the end of the day, it impacts our kids. But like Lori said, just making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and making sure that our kids are safe and fed and having what they need first and foremost. So stressful, but
I'm going to bring in the voice of Marta Silva Serrano to this conversation. So she says, online education openly shows a lack of equity in our communities. While some privileged students complain about amount of homework or boredom, many of our students of color are going to work unprotected, no mask, no gloves, no social distancing. Thank you, Marta, for that comment. Absolutely. Like, I think that one thing that I would hope that most of us know, but I think we often have to reinforce and remind our community and others in our community that the inequities that we're seeing right now are inequities that have always existed, but this situation has exacerbated that and compounded that in exponential ways. And so, this is I'm going to pivot a little bit to why I think our mission is so important in terms of representation, because I think I solidly believe that by having educators like yourself, Lori, educators like yourself, Susanna, who understand the needs of the community, who might share the lived experiences of the community that you're in, you're able to elevate those voices in a different way and maybe think differently about how to deliver the services and to meet the needs of the students that are there. What are your thoughts on that? Does representation matter? Yes or no?
Oh, representation definitely matters. But it's the ears that are listening. Is the ears on the other end. I mean, we could represent, but who's processing? Are they really listening, or are they just hearing? That's
a strong point. I'm a sit in silence with that one. Like, are they hearing or are they listening? And that's a really great distinction.
Lori, you mentioned earlier that you come from a background that was similar to the students that you first taught, and then including now. I think that's a part of representation. You know, I'm also from the neighborhood that my kids live in and I live in. And I think to our kids, it's important to know that a world exists out there outside of Northeast, you know, or outside of the West Side or outside of KCK. And I consider that representation too. You know, you're totally right. Like, you can have a teacher of color and they not be impactful, right? And they not be a quality teacher. I think another facet to that is being connected with the community that our kiddos are from, so that we can eliminate as many biases and stereotypes as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so I think it's real funny because this is my first year at Central, and then the 2 previous years I was at De La Salle. But when I was at Central, my first year, and my students, you know, they first fill you out because it's kind of like a sub and you're the new in the building. And then when you know, I share my story, and it's important for teachers to share your story. It's your testimony. I think that sometimes educators like, oh, we can't tell them what we've been through. We can't tell them, you know, and I'm like, look, let me tell you. And they're like, oh, listen to her code switch it up so quick, you know. And I'm like, don't let my education fool you. And so they're like, oh. But students respect when you have a story to tell them, and you're as transparent as you professionally, you know, of course, can be. They respect that. So when, you know, I'm like, look, I was a high school dropout. I know what it's like to struggle. I don't care, you know, and that's what I tell them. I don't care what grade is on this piece of paper, but I know our goal is 24 credits, and it's going to take you 24 credits to get across that stage. And so I know what it's like. I know what it's like to graduate with a baby on my hip because I was a teen mom also. And so then you get people and they're like, oh, so, you know, it's building those bonds and those relationships. And so the community part is important because I might not have grown up in Northeast. I might not have grown up, as the kids would say, over in the 30s or the 40s where Central is. But when you build those connections, you know, you become part of their community, and then those trust and those connections start to form.
It's a level of respect that goes with it, right? Like respecting our kids as human beings and respecting that they have value in their community. You know, they're not all like, oh, we got to get out of here, or, you know, this place is a bad place. Having respect for their community, where they're from, their family that's still there, you know, and or that, you know, some of them that choose to be there and that they have the right to do that, right? So respecting that about our kids as well.
Right. And they need to learn, you know, you take pride where you come from.
Yep.
It's actually, yeah, I mean, it's so important when we talk about also being strong in your cultural identity, right? Being understanding not just where you come from, but where your parents come from the communities that they came from, understanding the history that comes along with that and being respectful of it, but also understanding that like we're not beholden to our past, right? And then we can also look to the future and see that hope. You mind if I dive into some more deep conversations and some more personal conversations? Yeah or nay? You can tell me.
You're fine.
So
I'll tell you, I won't answer it.
Hey, cool. As long as you're honest and open like that, that's great. What do you think that your experience as how do you think that your experience as a teen mom has colored the way that you are today as a teacher, the way that you support your students through difficult situations?
You know, As a teen mom, it was the time when I wasn't in school, and I knew that when I was a teen mom, I don't know if you know anything about the Argentine community, but they have the apartments, the Silver City apartments. And I was born on my birth certificate. It says 2321 Silver Court, Third Court. That's where I was born. And then here goes the cycle, right? So you're always talking about we have to break the cycle. So then years pass, and my mom ends back up in the exact same apartment complex, same exact apartment. And so when my daughter was born, on her birth certificate, it says 2321 Silver Court. Like, that's crazy. So I just knew that when I had to go back to school, and I had to do better for her. And so I knew it wasn't going to be welfare, but I knew I had to get an education. And so I was credit deficient. I tried to go back to Harmon, and I couldn't do it. It was just too hard. I went back when I was pregnant, but after I had her, it was just too much. So then they was like, well, go to De La Salle. And I was like, I don't know about De La Salle, but that's where I went. And that's where I ended up graduating. And how it affects me and the teacher that I am is because, you know, girls have babies, and I would say sometimes they're persecuted, like, oh God, look, she's pregnant, she has a baby, she's going to be nothing, and she can't. And, you know, I'm able to say, no, look, all right, the baby is a blessing. It's going to make your challenge, your walk, your journey a little bit harder, but you can stick with it and you're going to be fine, right? Because the credits didn't change. You still need the same amount of credits. That don't change, okay? But your schooling, your job, that's a little harder. I think one of the things that that's evolved a little bit is daycare and childcare, because there are schools now that have it. De La Salle was one of the only schools in Kansas City at the time that had a childcare when I had my daughter, and that's one of the reasons I was there. Mm-hmm. But now at Central High School, they have a daycare for our students and their children. And then I learned from the students that once they graduate high school, if they go to the community college or to college, then their child can go one more year to the daycare. So that's good. But it helps me able to share with them my story and not let them know that, you know, just because you have a baby, that does not mean you're not going to be successful.
Calling into space, Sebastian, he says, as has been mentioned already, worried about students being at higher risk of infection, in addition to lower access to health services, particularly with fewer adults that can provide in-person supervision and support. Educators play lots of roles that are currently much less accessible to our students. Thank you for that comment, Sebastian. And as we're looking at the data, I think we've seen a couple of articles recently talking about how COVID-19 is systematically impacting Black and Brown folks at disproportionate levels versus the other community for a variety of different reasons, which include the same systemic inequities that people face on the day prior to COVID-19. Sebastian mentions that point of, like, teachers are more than teachers, right? You do more than just educate folks and stick on curriculum and pace. You're also providing that emotional support, that mental support, resources to food, whatever the student sees. Most of the educators right now are really concerned with the overall well-being of the child. Lori, how have you navigated that? You know, you deal with students who you build deep, intense relationships with, and now that you're not able to see them in person and check in, you're like, what is that like for you?
Okay, so now I might cry. So, like Susana said, it was hard when the food service was eliminated because of one of the workers. I mean, but I can understand for the safety. But one of my things in my room is the students always had hot chocolate with marshmallows, or coffee, and they had access to snacks, right? And so they knew, I don't know if it's just me or maybe our culture, I don't know, but you come to Miss Peters' classroom, you're going to eat, right? And some days I made it incentive days, so you could earn like 3 or 4 snacks. But one of the burdens that I've been grieved with is, how are my kids eating? And so when Dr. Badil had the food thing going with the district, okay, that relieved a little bit of my worry. But even when it comes to winter break and spring break and even over summer break, that's always been bothersome to me, just because I know what it's like to go without food. I know what it's like to be what is it called? Just and I tell the students, you guys don't know what hunger is. Like, you might, because when they come to school, oh, Miss Peters, I'm hungry. I was like, oh, I got these chips. Oh, you don't have no hot chips? No, well, I'm not hungry. Well, you guys don't know what starving is. You don't know what hunger is. Miss Peters, I want some hot chips though. Well, I'll go to Sam's this weekend. And I tell them, when I went to school, all I had was lunch. We didn't have a breakfast program, right? We didn't. So I'd eat lunch, and then the next day, I didn't eat again until the next day. They'd be like, dang, Miss Peters, what kind of life do you live? And so what gets me through is, I just have to pray and hope that they're all right. And in my Google Classroom, I post the resources for them to go and get food, and just hope that they're reading it, that they even have the access to read it, because that goes back to that digital divide.
You just, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm like over here crying now.
I'm just trying to look it up, like, oh, I'm not gonna cry.
I tried just not to think about it, but it's hard not to think about, and that's what's so important about us keeping up with our kids. I read a report that has just stuck with me like really hard the last week or so, which is that DFS reports are down 50%. And I shared that statistic with some friends the other day, or some family, and they were like, well, how does that correlate? How does that correlate with schools being closed? And I'm like, teachers are number one mandated reporters. So I might not be able to talk about it for long, but knowing that some of our kids are just, needing a safe space and a place like your classroom, where it sounds like they're taken care of and loved on,
when students come to my room, because I do high school, and it's hard because, like Edgar said, you are more than a teacher. I had a student, he came to my room, and I said, oh, it's the 4th hour, you can't come in, you can't skip. And, he just came to cry because one of his friends was lost to gun violence the night before. And I was like, oh my God, here I'm about to send him away. And I'm like, just come in. And he by that time he's full out crying. And, so when you're that teacher, and that you're that teacher, and I think that you have that burden, you just don't just turn it off at 3 o'clock and say, all right, well, I'm logging out. It's just one that carries with you. So it's really hard. And I was telling my husband yesterday, it's kind of grieving. It's like you're grieving.
I had to say, I am so appreciative of your vulnerability, both of you, right now, because I know this is incredibly difficult, and it's an incredibly difficult time to be having this conversation. But I hope that that your courage and your ability to speak up and elevate the voices of students right now is absolutely needed. And so thank you for doing that. And thank you for being willing to do that and share this with us. Before we move on, just quickly, Caress, she feels you. And then got to tell you, Miss Wafer says that your students are spoiled. And that's good.
Oh, they are.
But I think that's the beautiful thing. Like, this is what inspires me about educators, and this is what inspires me about teachers. Susanna and I launched about three weeks ago. We did an LEC virtual care package, and we were just doing micro grants of $25 to teachers who needed any type of support. And we gave 3 options, right? We gave the option for that money to be spent on students, for that money to be spent on classrooms, and for that money to be spent on self-care. All 3, which are equally important in this space, because clearly, like, we need a little bit of time for ourselves, like you said, Lori. But I've been really heartened and surprised, not surprised, surprise is the wrong word. I've been really warmed by the fact that most educators have taken those micro grants to purchase apps to better virtually connect with their students, or buy a stationery so they can send like notes of encouragement, right? Or even think about like gift cards, or even use that money for to purchase food for some of the families that may have those needs. And so educators are incredibly strong and are like the lifeblood of our community. And I think this time, amongst even the inequities that were being shown, like, we also, hopefully, we're starting to appreciate to a better level the impact that teachers have in the lives of not just their students, but our community, our parents. And so just want to create that space. Marta, she's on the same boat with you all. She says, I miss them terribly. I worry. I know that things are not okay. We need to keep on showing up, being visible. We need our students to see us.
Yeah. So the district gave permission for us to have a temporary Facebook page, like a Facebook for our classroom. And so I try not to do it every morning, because they're going to think Mrs. Peters is a stalker, right? And Cress, the one young lady that popped up, she's really my paparazzi lady. But I've known her forever. We used to Mexican dance together. So I have to channel her, because I've never done Facebook Live. And so I go on and I do Facebook Live messages to my students in the grad lab. And sometimes I'm repeating the same thing, but it makes me feel better that they can see me. And then I go and I look to see how many views. And so they are viewing it and they are watching it, and some are liking it. And then I'm like, yes, Miss Peters misses you. And then they click the little love button. So I'm like, they probably think I'm just so corny. Like, this corny little lady. But they have to know that they're still being thought about, that it's not fictitious and just in the classroom.
I created a teacher Instagram page, which I didn't have before because I was so busy. And now I have some free time, right? And so I created, and I'm getting like messages all the time. I guarantee you I have 5 lined up right now of kids like just wanting to message me. And it just shows that they miss school and that they miss us too. And that, you know, it is a beautiful bond to have a consistent adult and to have consistent little people too that love you. So that bond is, you know, it's hard to explain.
It really is. It's nice.
It is.
What, Lori, let me ask you this, like, if there's anything that you're excited about right now, what are some, maybe the opportunities that you're seeing that are coming from this moment in time, that are actually giving you a little bit of hope in how we proceed as a community?
I think it's teaching us as teachers just to be flexible. It's teaching us to change our lens on how we see what education looks like. Because some of us are going to be really shell-shocked to go back to the classroom when it's time to go back, and we're like, wait, we did virtual for even this many weeks. Is there a virtual position open to work from home? I mean, because sometimes it's nice, like, oh, I'm going to get up and I can just do this part of and I'm looking good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's going to be, I think, different opportunities that might come from this. I think that might be a positive. I think how the community within, I think our KCPS has kind of pulled together a little bit. I don't know.
I think for those of us that weren't comfortable with like virtual and Google Classroom and posting YouTube, like all the virtual things that we've kind of been being pushed toward for the last 5 years, right? Like try more virtual. But it was uncomfortable, you know, for those of us that have been teaching for 2020, not us, people who have been teaching for a longer period of time, you know, like to go on to virtual was a little uncomfortable. So I think that's one of the positives, that people really haven't had a choice but to learn Zoom.
I'll piggyback on Susanna. We have a wonderful woman by the name of Andrea Cook.
Yes.
And has been telling us, okay, try this app, do this app. And we're like in PD, like, yeah, all right, we got this, you know. Not me, of course, but I just observed it. And now this pandemic comes, it's like, oh God, what did she say to do? And it's those apps to use. And it's like, Andrea, can you help me? And she's probably like, all right, you know.
Please refer to my last email. That's what she said. She's like, please refer to that last email that I sent out.
They're only paying attention. But okay, here we go. You know.
Yep.
No, I appreciate that.
Definitely pushed us out of the box. And probably come to retirement.
Well, we are, you know, part of our mission also is to keep teachers in the classrooms. And so we're hoping that this is our opportunity to hopefully build community virtually as well. We absolutely love to meet in person and bring people together. But, you know, this is part of our effort too, to make sure that teachers specifically and most prominently Latinx educators feel like they are part of a larger community, feel like they are that they're loved and they're needed, that they're wanted, and that hopefully we're supporting them in the best ways that we can. And so you're a part of that community, right? And hopefully when others retire, you know, you're going to stick around for a little bit longer. I'm not going to get you to commit that on camera, but, you know, it is what it is. I'm bringing the voice in of Hurston. Hurston says teachers and educators have always been flexible. The antiquated systems that they have to work in and through are what's being exposed right now.
Yes, that's very true. I'm glad you said that, because that's definitely what we meant, right? Like, you know, the systems are so antiquated that, you know.
There are some teachers who are antiquated. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. You know, they don't like to change. They're like, look, I've had my classroom and my chair for 35 years, and
you know, Lori came here with the real talk today. So, you know, I think you're right. I think that this is an opportunity, not just an opportunity, but it's, you know, force is probably not the right word, but like we have to adapt. And you made a really good point earlier in the conversation saying that like our students, they've been in this world for a while. They've been connecting with folks virtually. They've been, you know, doing TikToks and all the other apps that I'm not getting familiar with. And so now they're going to be developing new apps because like we're now going to start to flood those apps and like they're going to like peace out. We don't want to be here anymore.
Yep.
I did not realize TikTok was so old.
Well, I mean, like,
I thought it was new.
Right? I don't know. I feel like it's been around for a while, but I could be wrong. Like, again.
Well, Edgar, if you know about it, then definitely the kids are starting to like peace out. Because I mean, it takes you a while to get on.
You know, I just learned about Snapchat myself, so and I know that's been around for like a week. So want to bring the voice in of Sebastian for the students that do have access. Improved technology literacy is instrumental in college readiness and professional preparedness. This is one gap that might get narrower. That's a really good point. In fact, actually, I was talking to Hurston earlier today about particularly students that are graduating, their seniors this year. Like, what does college look like right now? Those that are planning to attend college and have that ability to do so, right? What is this 6 month, maybe longer kind of break from, you know, in-person social interaction? What, you know, how will that impact that incoming college experience? Or how might it improve it?
I don't know. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be another one of those unfortunate adjustments that they're going to have to make and accept. I mean, because the class of 2020, their prom, their commencement, and for those who are headed to college, they don't have their incoming freshman orientation, their dorm, they don't have that. So it is very disheartening. And even looking for the alternative ways to brighten it up, to them, it's just like, this doggone corona. I mean, what did you go and do to us?
Yeah.
But because they can't see it and it's not tangible, they're looking at the people who are making the policies and the procedures, and it, unfortunately, oh well, for those who like to, want someone to blame, oh well, that's the best you could do, or that's our fault.
Right.
And sometimes we do have to just take that. This is the best that we can do right now.
Shout out to Miss Wafer for schooling us on TikTok, by the way. She said it was called Musically, and before that it was Flipgram.
I know that Flipgram.
See, everything.
I knew Musically, so that has been around for a couple of years. A few, at least that I know of.
We're still engaging on Facebook here, so anyways. I really get energized by these conversations because at the end of the day, it's always good to see teachers who are committed, teachers who are human, teachers who are trying to navigate these spaces on behalf of their students, show up and talk about these issues. So I thank you for that. One thing, I was able to join a conversation with Dr. Carpenter, the former superintendent of Lee Summit, and he was talking about that. One of his concerns during this time was something that kind of you brought up, Lori, which is what happens to the assignments that are happening now, right? What are those going to be used potentially used against students, and maybe making determinations around holding them back or placing them into different type of programs and whatnot. So part of his concern was since this is new to us as a community, why haven't we just stopped, instruction, so to speak, and just really focus on the Maslow needs of students versus, the Bloom, so to speak.
You can't get the Blooms if the Maslows aren't met.
Right.
I used to have a poster of that somewhere, but so I like to see what other districts are doing, not just locally, but everywhere. And I can see that fourth quarter grades with the teaching and what is going on. I mean, some assignments should be given so our students can stay engaged. Should it be in depth? I don't believe it should. It should really be, should our students fail? I don't believe they should. They should not. Their grades should really be based off of what they have learned in the third quarter. And a lot of districts are freezing their students' grades. But to fail a student without giving them an opportunity to improve for passing, I think that needs to be looked at and addressed. So if you already have a student who is passing, that should just be their final grade. Mm-hmm. But we do have students who procrastinate and say, "Oh, well, when I return to school, I'm going to really buckle down." It happens. It happens at the end of the semester. Like, "Oh, Miss Susanna, what can I do to here's all my work." And they hand you all the first semester, "Can I bring my grade up?" And whereas teachers like, "Oh, all right," after we give them a speech. So if they have an F, we should be able to provide them the opportunity with some type of assignment to bring that F up. We should not say, "Oh, no, you don't have an opportunity to do so." That is just what I believe. I don't think that we should just say, "Oh, no, you failed. the pandemic came. That's it.
Harrison has a question for you. What are your thoughts on student reactions to the actual amount of time it takes for them to complete the work now relative to what they were doing physically in school? So I think you mentioned that some students are completing the work super fast these days. And so like instead of spending 8 hours in a classroom or in different classrooms doing work, like they can just knock it out in 2. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's, that he asked that. I've been sitting here thinking about that the last few days. Like, what I do here from 9 to 3, why do I have to go to my building at 6:45 and be there until whenever I leave? Like, God, this is gravy, right? I'm monitoring the same students. But I think that my opinion is there's going to be some type of change, some kind of a push. It's going to take, to me, parents rule the world. Parents rule education. So if there's going to be, right now, there are, believe it or not, some don't know, but there are virtual. A parent can call the district right now and say, I want my kid on virtual. It might not look the same. It might look a little different, but there is a virtual program. They drive their own learning. That's a state thing. That's a DESE thing.
I'm glad you're calling it into the space. So if we want to make some changes in the educational system, you're absolutely right. The power is within parents, and I think we have to figure out not necessarily how to organize parents, because I think parents can absolutely organize themselves, but how do we continue to amplify and elevate their voices in these conversations and continue to ask thought-provoking questions around like, so if we could do education this way, why do we have to go back to the old way?
DESE sets how many minutes a student has to be in a seat in a building each day.
Mm-hmm.
So even though that work takes 10 minutes for them to do, and it's the same assignment a teacher gives, the DESE says that student must be in that seat 6 hours and 8 minutes a day.
And you know what? Was it Sebastian earlier that was talking about the antiquated system?
Yeah.
We live in such a new world than in 1920 when a lot of these things were established, right? In 1950 when a lot of these things were established. A conversation I commonly have with my siblings who have kids, I say like, hey, the school system is serving you and your family, and so take responsibility. I guess not responsibility, maybe responsibility, and know your rights. Know what rights.
I think
ownership, and know what rights you have. Know what rights your kids have, and stand up. And unfortunately, some of our families don't have that privilege and don't have that luxury. So we do need educators who are willing to say, "Hey, your student can go XYZ," or you know what I'm saying? To advocate for our kids. But I would encourage parents, families, grandparents to know their rights as far as the school system and the schools go. Because just how we hold our kids to a high standard and high expectations, the same should be done for our school system.
Marta reminds us it's also not just about the assignments, but we're also teaching collaboration, compassion, patience, a lot of the things that do need to happen interpersonally as well. And so I'm sure that there's an opportunity for us to figure out how to integrate these new kind of ways of doing instruction and readjusting to teach students the skills that what we call, I guess, 21st century like leadership skills or learning skills. By the way, we're like 20 years into 21st century. So maybe we should be looking at like 22nd century stuff at this point. I can't believe how fast time goes with these conversations. So we could keep you here all day, but we have roughly 3 minutes. And so I like to do things. I like to say, Susanna, you always have the last question as an educator. And then I'm going to just have a more formal community question. So you have the real last question. I just have a basic question at the end here. But go for it.
You would ask a question or a comment?
No.
Okay. Just
you have a question. Yeah.
I think we just had this Missouri announcement like an hour ago, and so I think please reach out to your teacher friends and your educator friends, virtual hugs, all of that, because I'm clearly still processing Lori, I'm sure you feel the same way. I still haven't processed it. And so just reach out to your teacher friends and reach out to me because I need some love. I'm grieving a little bit.
I will.
Thank you for that, Susana. Lori, so as we wrap up, what are some things, what is one thing that we as a community can do to support you?
Definitely if you're the praying type, keep me in your prayers. And then two, just definitely, make sure that you are when the kids go back to school, that you're supporting the teachers that you know, whether it be pencil, paper, dropping just random stuff off, not random stuff, like school supplies. At the schools, just supporting your schools. That's the thing that I know most. Or sharing the resources that you know that can benefit teachers, because we are out here, we are really grieving our students right now. Even though we see them social media, there's that loss of the actual physical contact relationship with them. So my thing is just, keeping other teachers and the students first and foremost when we do go back to school.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a good reminder for all of us as we move forward into a new school year. Having said that, Lori, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
This was incredibly fun. Susana, thank you so much for joining us as well and being part of this conversation. You're a huge part of the LEC family, so thanks for being here with us. Lori, with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the conversation and the broadcast. Just stick with us for a couple minutes just to follow up. But community, I think one of the biggest things that I heard today was love on your educators, love on the teachers, make sure that they're doing okay. A quick text, a quick email, a quick letter, whatever it is, whatever it takes, make sure that you're loving on them today, because our teachers are going through some really interesting times, as well as all of us, but even more so. So anyways, thank you so much. We'll be in touch soon.
Yay.